Hello, today I'm going to talk about pros and cons of studying art and design or creative subjects in a formal environment. Whether it's academic or vocational, there are lots of advantages to doing this and there are other disadvantages, and this allows you to weigh up what the right thing is for you and also maybe reflect on your own experiences of being institutionalised in this way, if that's something you have already partaken in your life. So I'll start with the 3 pros of being in a formal study environment. So the first one is being part of an enriching, supportive learning community. This might be known as a community of practice. It gives you opportunity for lots of feedback, a sense of belonging, relationships and collaboration opportunities, building a future community and network for your career, and just the kind of sense of connection and contribution to a broader course, things that allow you to participate in that community, including critiques and sort of seminars, so you're always bringing your own studio practice or music creation or creative writing, whatever it is, you're bringing it into a sort of group, which is like often a positive thing for people. You can get lots of people's input, you can get other opinions, and you're not just doing it in a void. So that's the first pro. The second is that there would likely be some level of structure, so whether that's through briefs and topics that are prompting you to do specific things, essentially giving you ideas, giving you inspiration, giving you something to bounce off, having structure through a curriculum as well as structure through a timetable and specific working days, deadlines and assessment deadlines. That could be really beneficial for producing a lot of work, having lots to explore, especially if you don't have, you want to be doing creative stuff but you don't necessarily have endless inspiration and organic, innate stuff that you want to be working on. So having that external input is good, and especially if you struggle with consistency and routine. It's one thing like being driven to express and create when the muse descends, but actually having the consistent drive to make as you would when you're being prompted by an external course or programme is different. So in that sense, the tuition, that sort of curriculum, study framework, all of the different briefs and projects and prompts you might receive, having a schedule that you have to pretty much stick to, and assessment kind of situations actually end up making you produce a lot more. So there's a kind of quantity thing. It might not be all your quality best work, but you'll learn a lot about yourself through doing things that you wouldn't probably choose to do in and of yourself. The third pro is having access to facilities, space, technical support, and opportunities to professionally present and expand and scale your work in a way that wouldn't be possible in your own bedroom or home space, or even if you had a studio that you hired and paid for, it wouldn't be the same. And this is probably mostly beneficial for if you're making work that's like sculptural or large, or if you're making work that's technical, so you have access to cameras and studios if you're wanting to do filmmaking, or you're doing music production, having access to studios and instruments and the technology that far exceeds that which you could have at home. Even in design disciplines, sort of like, when you're part of an institution, you get all sorts of access to programs, Adobe Suite, that kind of thing, libraries even, academic libraries, things that you wouldn't get as an average Joe. Also the opportunity with that, usually there's technicians beyond the academic staff or tutors that are teaching you your subject and offering feedback and guidance via tutorials, seminars, critiques and other feedback scenarios. You also usually have access to staff that are specifically trained to do things technically very well. So this might be something that enables you to learn and up-level actual skills. So if you are thinking like, oh yeah, I'm a skills-based sort of practitioner artists, I want to hone a craft, whether that's a technical craft, as in whether that's like a digital craft or it's a kind of more sculptural traditional craft that requires the use of, say, ceramics workshops, kilns, wood and metal workshops, those kinds of things. Those are all things that an institution would provide that you would not get at home, / it's very difficult to find that kind of thing. Obviously there are different cities or places or artistic communities that have developed those resources, and you can like pay a membership to be part of that, but it is something that I know that peers of mine that have done that sort of stuff have struggled with that transition after being in an academic environment, being in an art school, to then go into having to adjust their work or adjust their working processes because you're not able to do things at the scale or to the quality you would at home, and having to like, you know, buy a kiln or whatever if you're producing ceramics. Okay, so that's the pros, and there are 3 strong pros. Again, that's having a learning community, a sense of connection and contribution to a wider community and the feedback opportunities that provides, having prompts, kind of constraints of a formal study curriculum, and having access to facilities. So the cons are basically the flip side to those 3 things. The first one is with being part of a community and the kind of constant input and feedback from other people, you can actually get very disconnected from your own creative voice. So this is where the idea of attachment versus authenticity comes in, because we can sometimes adapt and want to create work to please tutors or make work in the house style of an institution, and to work with our peers, work competitively with our peers, and it's almost kind of like a bubble microcosm that is not really indicative of the real world and the spectrum, the full spectrum of creative stuff you can do in the real world. Because each institution ultimately will have its own tutors, lecturers, it'll have its own ideologies and orthodoxies, and these kinds of things can like filter down from the broader culture and like say where we are in, let's say, conceptual art, and how conceptual art and de-skilling in arts has affected what the art school teaches and provides, and the kind of work that certain institutions make, for example, is definitely affected by the ideology and the kind of dominant vibe of like postmodernism, and that's kind of problematic. Say if you're, I mean, I know that a lot of painters have struggled with this, people who've gone on to study painting, or have been in fine art courses where there's not support with painting from a technical, conceptual, whatever standpoint. It's almost like painting's, not cool anymore, so you're not going to be taught any anatomical things, even though you might thrive as an artist, painting portraits, offering like commercial artworks, in that sense. Sometimes institutions and it's all about choosing which institution is correct, of course, but that's something to research on. There's this book by James Elkins called Why Art Cannot Be Taught, which speaks to a lot of these issues. And it's the same with creative writing disciplines, music disciplines, and even design disciplines, that you can often get a situation where tutors and certain peers, certain voices, certain dominant personalities can really dominate and affect the whole vibe of what's like cool work to make, what's like not, and thus people can, especially at an impressionable age, if you're sort of going from teens to being an adult, which is the age at which a lot of people study, there can almost be like this people-pleasing thing of like, okay, well, I'm adapting to my environment and making work in this voice and it's not authentic to me, and years later I'll be like, why was I even making that kind of thing? It was all because of the orthodoxy and pressures and ideologies of the institution, and becoming a sort of like house style. And this is where the term like outsider art is also interesting, because when people are not in an academic or formal study environment, they can end up being termed like an outsider because they haven't been indoctrinated by the sort of creative whatever of the day. In the same way, you might just like be an artist in your garret doing your thing, and in some ways that might actually be more aligned and organic. And this is controversial to say because most people who are teaching in art schools and things are like, there is no void, like there is no void, you can't create in a void, you have to be responding to and engaging with the culture and the cultural sort of criticism of the day. But I don't think that's necessarily true, and there's lots of artists who haven't done that and have made very interesting work, and maybe that's from a more inner like Jungian archetypal sort of expressive old school genius artist zeitgeist reflector person who doesn't necessarily have to be consciously like talking about theories and ideas and putting that in a critical studies framework in order to do that. Yeah, the second thing is the negative flip side to the prevalence of curriculum prompts and assessment things is that you can end up with deadlines, forms of assessment, projects that you're not actually interested in or organically driven to do at all. You can kind of make work to an academic framework and start to use like an art speak or a language that you're not actually interested in and won't use in the real world unless you're going to be doing like a PhD where you need to use that kind of language. It's really alienating and kind of just becomes like art for artists in a way, or art for researchers. Also, you can end up producing work that's like a high quantity of work, but it's not got quality, it's not got a sort of authenticity or essence of you in it at all, because you're just making it almost, yeah, interestingly maybe as like I learn by making what I don't want to make through the prompts and the external sort of, yeah, external kind of prompts from others. That can be a way to learn what you do want and what your voice is. And there's the advantage of obviously learning the rules in order to then break them, and like killing the teacher, which are all things that are probably necessary in the journey of individual authentic creativity and voice, is that you're somewhat grappling with having like lots of things thrown at you as projects or ideas that you are then filtering through and like finding within that what's actually resonant with you and what is interesting, and then rejecting certain things and adopting certain things, and yeah, basically refining your palette in that way. But yeah, they can also with assessments and with deadlines and with the sort of artificial pressures and urgency of the academic year, that can sort of emulate a sort of school experience where you're pressured to do a lot and make a lot and write a lot of stuff that is not of any relevance if you were just practicing and selling your work. And it can give you a lot of angst and feelings of needing to justify and needing to connect it to a broader historical, cultural, academic framework, even though you might well do better like drawing your things that you draw, doodling your doodlings, or like beavering away, producing your music and then just releasing it and then not thinking about it too much. Certainly from a commercial standpoint, I don't think, yeah, anyway, we'll move on from that. On the commercial standpoint, note the third point, which is the flip side to the benefits to having like access to facilities and resources, is that being part of a study program can be extremely expensive. Tuition fees, even if there's student loans available, and debt's a big consideration. Often facilities are oversubscribed. There's not enough space to physically have a lot of stuff going on, or to make the work that you want to make. So often art institutions are heavily oversubscribed. They're accepting way more students than they actually have capacity for, purely because they're banking on the fact that, okay, well, students are lazy, most of them aren't going to come into the studio all the time, or they can hot desk, or we can come up with ways to sort of manage the volume of students. And obviously not everyone wants a studio, not everyone needs a studio. This is specifically for like an art studio. I'm not talking about music studios in music colleges, but that's also a consideration, that there might be way more demand to use those facilities than the actual capacity of the resource. So a lot of people are in a situation where they are, they feel like they're paying for a course or they're paying for the facilities and they're not getting the full benefits. Maybe the studios aren't even open the hours that people want to work in and thrive working in. They might be oversubscribed, and then you kind of have to work in an unnatural way where, okay, well, the studio's only available, like let's say you're booking a film studio or a music studio, oh, it's only available like next Wednesday at 4 p.m. Or if I have to collect a camera and do my day's filming at like 8:30 a.m. when the workshop's open, that's not really when I'm going to feel like doing that thing. And you have to become a lot more organised and sort of mechanical about it, essentially, if you are using facilities in that way. You can also end up with a lot of pressure with the technical stuff that's available to make use of those things, even though you don't really want to, and they're not really relevant to you. And especially when it comes to exhibiting work or creating the final stuff, to work in a way that's like, oh yeah, showing that I've like improved my technical, professional standards of presentation, only to then feel like, well, okay, I explored that, but didn't really wanna, and don't really care. Which I have general irreverence for everything, so I think don't listen to me on that. But yeah, I think basically like there's a lot of standards imposed and a lot of things happening, but ultimately, you know, you can find the resources and do the stuff that you want to do in a language, whether it's the actual formal, you know, proper presentation of something, or just a kind of like less technically adept, realised version. You can certainly do that yourself without any, if you have the drive to do it, without any institutional input. Feedback can corrupt and mess with it. And yeah, essentially, there's just a lot going on. They're intense, energetically intense spaces. Obviously, those are the pros and cons. Then there are people like me who, now I've left these environments, and it's not necessarily 100% consciously, intentionally. Partly it was geographical. I left my job in London and I wanted to live in West Yorkshire and be near a family and have a different kind of life. But yeah, basically, I'm really, in a lot of ways, missing being part of an academic learning community. I find that I have a lot of intellectual energy that is not being used. But ultimately, when I was in them, I was always frustrated with some of these things about the orthodoxies or the imposition of individual tutors, lecturers' wills and opinions on impressionable young people. And as well, I think, in an ideal world, I think one-to-one guidance is the most meaningful for me, in a way that's like holds space for an individual to actually, just be who they actually are and be asked questions and be prompted, not in a way that's going to overly influence or cloud their work, but will help them refine their voice and their expression. So that's kind of what I was hoping to offer with holistic creative guidance and what was Heart School. I think when groups and bigger communities of practice are involved, it's just more complex, and maybe that's not so much my domain, and I didn't really enjoy. I enjoyed anyway, I think there's so much nuance to this, and I'm going to stop talking now because it's been a while, but this is a rich conversation, and I am someone who can help hold space for creative self-realisation and connection, especially if you have felt that you've been in an environment, you've either not had access to creative study programmes and are curious about that, or if you're someone who's had that and feels like you're struggling to find your own voice within that after leaving those environments, and everyone in between. I can hold space for that, so just see the link below if that's something that interests you. Thank you for watching, and leave your comments below on your experience of the pros and cons of studying and why you did or didn't go and study your creative subject formally. Thank you.